Oh, thank you. You're so kind. Thank you, my pretend fans, and thank you, my real listeners, for joining me today. Now it's been a while since we've spoken, and yeah, I mean there are a variety of reasons for that. Really, I mean, most of all, it's just been, well, I guess two reasons. One is because I've had so much going on. There's a lot changing with my career, my professional life, my education, my everything. Everything's kind of up in the air and going crazy right now. But also, it's football season's over. Free agency was honestly a little underwhelming, if I'm being honest, at least for me. I wasn't as into it as I normally am. But we do have the draft to look forward to. And I have been watching a lot of NBA, a lot more NBA than I normally do. So I don't know. I guess I just haven't felt like talking about it. But I don't know. There are a lot of reasons why. My own mental state, as my longtime listeners will know, is not the most stable, and so I'm kind of clinically up and down, and so yeah, but anyway, I missed you guys. I missed talking while I'm driving, and so I decided to jump back on here. Honestly, what prompted me to do an episode today was I was listening to the radio, and maybe that's part of why I haven't been doing it too. I haven't been listening to as much sports radio, which I normally do every morning, but I hadn't for a while there because um, well, I'd just been listening to like blues radio and 90s stuff, which is pretty much the only music I listen to these days. And I'd also been letting the kids pick some songs in the morning that they wanted. And so I just hadn't been listening to as much sports talk radio like I normally do. But when I do, it kind of gets me a little bit fired up, and I feel like I need to respond to some things, or I feel like some things are wrong, or, I just want to add my take on things. And so, today I did that. And one of the things that I heard him talking about on ESPN radio was about SEC fandom, really, and how the SEC fans claim the entirety of the conference. And, I've got I'm going to dive into that in a few minutes because that was one of the things that prompted me to, to do an episode today. And then also, I was listening to Mike Florio, who is one of my top handful of sports personalities on Pro Football Talk on NBC Sports, which, yeah, I think he and Chris Sims are the only good thing I think they have on NBC Sports, and that's why they're on NBC Sports Radio like 90% of the time when you turn it on. But they were talking about some stuff with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins deal that felt like I needed to address or wanted to address. Not like I need to. I mean, nobody cares what I think anyway. But yeah, I just had some interesting takes. Plus, I wanted to give my thoughts on the Titans, where they stand, and the fact that it actually looks like there is some level of competence going on within the organization right now, which is strange given the way the last couple of years have gone. And then also we had obviously the SEC tournament where the Vols made it all the way to the finals and just couldn't keep up with Florida. I mean, it honestly, it wasn't a bad game by the Vols. It just, Florida had too much. I mean, that's just all it came down to. Like, Tennessee is and always will be under Rick Barnes one of the best defensive teams in the country, but our offense, that's what it all hinges on every single year. Are we going to go these long streaks without scoring? And, are we going to be able to keep up with the high scoring team? It's always the same. These past couple of years, it's been a little different though, because we've been so much better offensively. And the main reasons for that were last year, Dalton Connect, this year, Chaz Lanier, as well as Milicic whenever he can score, and Jordan Gainey. Um, but even though Gainey had a great game, Milicic was an absolute non-factor. Lanier didn't do much, but Gainey was carrying the team. If Lanier could have contributed some, we might have won that game. But Florida just, I mean, their guys did what they were supposed to do on both sides of the floor. Our guys did not. Our guys just did not do their part on the offensive end. But, we still made it to the finals of the SEC tournament, which honestly, if you look at it, is maybe the worst possible thing that could have happened because you exit the tournament early and you've got more time to rest and practice for the big tournament. But then if you win the tournament, then you got another banner to hang up and you get to cut down the nets and you get to celebrate. But if you make it all the way and you have to play that final game, then you're exhausted going into the tournament. You don't have any extra rest. You've just played several teams in the toughest in the toughest conference in the history of college basketball, and now you got to turn around and get ready for the real tournament. But we didn't suffer any injuries. I think our guys are honestly going to be primed. I think we're going to do well in the tournament, but I'll dive into that as well later. First, just wanted to say hello again to everybody, and can't promise you that I'm going to be back on regularly again. Although we have been doing some YouTube stuff lately. If you keep up with the YouTube channel, we put a couple things on there over the past couple of weeks. So I'm trying to stay on top of it as much as I can. Or honestly, the YouTube channel has really just become more for the kids than anything else, just because they love doing it. And I'm not expecting to really gain a big following from it or anything, but they really love doing it and they love being able to show it to their friends and stuff. So it's fun, and I like having an opportunity to just play games with them and do our thing and record it, put it out there. It's fun. And then this, as many of you guys know, is as much just therapeutic for me to just talk and drive as it is anything. So yeah, that's what we're doing. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break and we'll dive into all that stuff and more. All righty, friends, welcome back. So, um, I've got a handful of things on my notes today. Some I mentioned in the intro there with the Lakers, the Titans, the Vols basketball. But first, I'm going to jump into what got me kind of going this morning when I was listening to ESPN radio, which honestly, I don't listen to it as much as I used to. I watch ESPN a lot, but the radio, even though I like Canty and I kind of like Evan Cohen and shit, what's her name? That pretty blonde that's on there. I don't know. But I do kind of like them. It's just I don't know. They're not as interesting, and half the time they're not talking about sports. Then they do those stupid sports personality tournaments, and it's just I don't know. I don't like it. So I've honestly, even though I hate Fox and everything they stand for, I've been listening to a lot more Fox Sports. I've been listening to NBC Sports because it's pretty much always pro football talk with Florio and Chris Sims, who I love. But anyway, this morning I was listening to ESPN a little bit, and they were talking. I didn't catch the entirety of the conversation because it was right after I had dropped my daughter off at daycare, and they were already talking about it. But they were talking about how, like, SEC fans, how Michelle Smallman, that's her name. She was talking about how she's like sounded like kind of actively rooting against the SEC because SEC fans have been so annoying and the SEC has been so dominant this year. And it is, I think, undeniably the strongest conference, maybe well, at least in recent college basketball history. Um, and they were talking about how like SEC fans will, if an SEC team wins a bowl game or a championship or whatever, the entirety of all the SEC teams fans will kind of claim it. And honestly, I've never been that way. Like, because they were talking about like comparing it to, if you're a North Carolina fan, you don't want Duke to win the national championship, or, if you're Ohio State, you don't want Michigan, or vice versa. And although those are, I think, bad examples because those are obviously two of the most well known and heated rivalries in college sports, um, I don't necessarily feel the way. And I know that there are a lot of SEC fans like that, but I'm not rooting for Florida to win the national championship, or if Florida and Alabama get knocked out in the first round, I will laugh my ass off. Like, I do not want either of those teams to do well. Auburn, I feel differently about because I still love Bruce Pearl. Just still got a lot of affection and great memories from him. And I'm honestly still not completely over him getting fired and the way that all went down. And you kind of think of what could have been. Um, and plus, I just watched that Chris Lofton documentary on SEC Storied, and that just sort of renewed my love of Bruce Pearl. So I am rooting for them, but it's for a different reason. Um, but no, I'm not. If an SEC team wins, does well in the tournament, I'm not going to be claiming them. I'm not going to be rooting for it. No, I'm not like that. And I think there's this sense that that's how SEC people are because we just are aware that in both football and now basketball, it is clearly, it just means more, and it is the dominant sports conference. I mean, it's like that in baseball now, too. And, the basketball thing is new. That's really just started. I mean, it's been growing for the last few years, but the complete dominance and just it being so clearly better than everybody else, that's new. That's just this year. But in football, I mean, it's been that way for decades. So I don't feel the need to like be an SEC flag waver. We all know, even though Ohio State won the national championship this year, they were clearly the best team in college football. Michigan won the national championship last year. That's 2 years in a row that a Big Ten team has won the national championship. But I'm not, that's not making me have any doubt of the strength of the SEC. I mean, honestly, if Georgia would have been in the Final Four the way they should have been 2 years ago, they would have won, most likely. Hell, I'm not even getting into that, but if you listen to the show, you probably know my feelings on both Georgia and Florida State being left out of that Final Four group, and that's a whole thing. But um, but no, I don't feel like threatened by that. I don't think that just because those two teams were elite and great and won it all, that in any way diminishes the overall strength of the SEC. It doesn't. Ohio State was the best team in the country this year, and them losing to Michigan was the absolute best thing that could have happened to them because it woke something in them. It did something to them. They were always that talented and had that potential, but that loss is what won them the national championship. But they were always that good. But that doesn't mean that the strength of the SEC is any less. I mean, if you take the top 10 teams in the SEC, I'd take almost all of them over, just about anybody else in the Big Ten. The Big Ten had two good teams this year. I'm not counting Penn State in that. I think they were overrated all year. The SEC is just always better. It just is, top to bottom. Even if we don't have the best team in the country this year, the SEC is just top to bottom, inarguably always going to be the stronger conference in football. So I don't feel the need to like root for SEC teams to win it all. Because I mean it's like that I don't know what that gets me. Like I'm a Tennessee fan. I don't want Alabama to win shit. I don't want Florida to win shit. I will laugh my ass off if both of them are eliminated quickly in the basketball tournament. Like I just I don't now. Here's the other part of it though. Like I think that maybe fans of teams that necessarily are having bad years might feel more of the need to sort of cling to that SEC fandom because at least that can give them something to feel good about. Like an Auburn football fan this year might feel the need to, be more of an SEC guy. At least I can say that because their football team sucked this year. They were just one of the most disappointing teams in the country. Or, I don't know, you look at a basketball team, there really aren't that many that you could point to that had bad years in the SEC this year. But, like if your team's not doing well, like when Tennessee was irrelevant in football for, 12, 13, 14, however many years, I probably felt more SEC loyalty at that point. But also at that point, it hadn't been established for 20 years that SEC was just the best. So maybe fans of teams that, aren't really doing much have more of a need to wave that SEC flag. I don't know. But just speaking personally, no, I'm not rooting for SEC teams in the tournament. I mean, we don't have anything to prove. It is definitively the best conference in basketball right now. It is inarguably the best conference in football every year. Even if you want to say this past year was a down year, it is still undeniable that the SEC is just stronger top to bottom than anybody else. So, like I don't think we need to be waving that flag or cheering for our rivals or anything. I know I'm not. I mean, that's just my personal stance on it. So anyway, that because they were saying on the radio that SEC fans were annoying because they claimed the entire conference and blah blah blah. And there are people out there. There are lots of people out there like that, and maybe they're yelling the loudest. I don't know what the ratio is, or like if the majority of fans feel more the way I do, or feel that way. But I will say that there is some conference allegiance, some sort of conference pride that goes along, that just goes with it. But I don't think it's any more than anybody else. I think Big Ten fans want to, show that their conference is the second best, or, some of them are delusionally want to argue that their conference is the best. Um, I think that's just part of it, but it's not like the biggest part. And again, maybe for teams that don't really have a chance or that aren't really doing that well, maybe they feel more the need to wave that SEC flag. That would make sense to me. But for me personally, like, no, I don't want any of our rival teams to do well. I will laugh my ass off if they're eliminated quickly. And I'm not going to be at any point waving an SEC flag during the tournament or during college football season. It's just now you guys may have heard me last year, last at towards the end of the football season, talking about it and sort of, I guess you would say, waving the SEC flag. But at that point, it felt like it was necessary to point out how overrated Penn State and Indiana were. So I don't know. Maybe I'm contradicting myself here, but I'm not rooting for other SEC teams to do well, I guess is my point. Like if I feel like the argument needs to be made that yes, the SEC is better, then I will make that argument, even though it feels like no one should have to make that argument anymore. But I'm not necessarily rooting for these teams to win. I laughed my ass off when Alabama lost to Oklahoma. I also laughed when they lost to Vanderbilt. Like I laughed when Ole Miss blew it against Florida. Like I'm not rooting for these teams to do well so that I can, solidify my SEC position. It's just I feel like it's an undeniable fact that overall the conference is stronger in football. And I feel like this year at least, again, I think this is the first year we've ever been this because, normally in basketball, it's the ACC, maybe the Big Ten. The SEC has, Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee's been relevant for a while now, but, so is Auburn. But, it's not like it's a big time basketball conference. It's always more of a football conference. This year, I think for the first time, the SEC is undeniably better in basketball than everybody else. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because the idea that SEC fans are like actively rooting for every SEC team so we can show how good we are as a conference, I think that's wrong. Or at least it doesn't represent the majority of us. At least it doesn't represent me. I'm going to take a quick break and we'll dive into some more stuff. All righty, friends, welcome back. So, also in response to something from the radio and something that happened, the Bengals went ahead and they re-signed both receivers, which was a cool thing. I don't remember seeing this happen before, where a team basically re-signed their top two receivers together. Like I don't know if they were together with like if their agents were all together, if they had the same agent, or if they all did this together, or if it just they the timing. I don't know how it worked out, but it was a pretty cool thing that they did it like that. But they signed both Higgins and Chase to big time contracts, 4 year extensions. Now Trey Hendrickson's, wanting his, and that's going to be the next thing if they do that. He's requested a trade, I think, for the second time now, so I don't know. But the reason why this is relevant is because Mike Florio said something that I normally I agree with the majority of what he says. I think that's one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite guys because I agree with most of his sports opinions and I love his perspective on like just how he is as a journalist and how he was talking about it on today's show about how he's really out to try to uncover and report the shit they don't want you to know about. Like he's not as concerned, because he's established now and doesn't have to be as concerned with breaking things and getting his Twitter fingers out there as quickly as possible. He's more interested in. Anyway, if you listen to Pro Football Talk, you know what I'm talking about with Mike Florio. He just seems like my kind of guy. Like I like him as a reporter. I think I would like him as a person. And on even most of his football opinions, I tend to agree. But one he said was that he was surprised that the T. Higgins deal got done because he thought he would end up going somewhere else and he thought he could go somewhere else and be a number one receiver. I don't agree with that. I've always felt like T. Higgins was like, I don't think he could just go anywhere else and be a number one receiver. And I think it's because of the type of receiver he is. Like he is that, big body, physical, one on one, that man beater, you can't cover him, jump ball, back shoulder kind of guy. Um, and I know just for me personally, like when I'm playing Madden or whatever, that's not normally the type of receiver that I like. Like I would rather have a guy with speed who can, who's more of the deep threat or a guy who's electric with the ball in his hands. And T. Higgins just really isn't either of those things. Like he's kind of a specialist. And so that's why I don't think he could just go anywhere and be a number one receiver. I think he is a great fit where he is because he is a great complement to Jamar Chase. And Phil Simms, who's also on Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio, actually made that point as well. And I was glad to hear, somebody saying the same thing I was thinking. Like, I think he is a great complement to Jamar Chase, who is that speedster, who is that guy that can either run by the defense and catch it deep, or you can just get it to him and he can make a big play happen with the ball in his hands. Like he is a complete all around receiver, like number one, number two receiver in the league. Um, and I think that T. Higgins is a great complement to that on the other side, but I don't think he could just go anywhere and be a clear number one receiver because he doesn't have that speed. He's not special with the ball in his hands. Like, if you try to cover him one on one, which teams have to do a lot because they're so focused on Jamar Chase, that's how he can beat you because he's going to be bigger and stronger than the DBs. He's going to be able to go up and get the ball, and he's going to be able to beat you on his routes. And he's able to really excel at that because so much attention is paid to Jamar Chase on the other side. I think if he went somewhere and he was the guy, that might change, and he might not be as effective. And anyway, that was just my thought. But I do think for the Bengals, I think it was probably a good thing to keep them both, even though they haven't had a lot of success the last few years. Um, you want to keep Joe Burrow happy, obviously, and he, famously went out and laid out how all these contracts could happen and said he wanted to keep all these guys. Um, and so I think it was probably a good thing for them, even though, again, T. Higgins, it just feels like is not he might now be a little bit overpaid, but as long as Jamar Chase is there, then T. Higgins is probably worth that money. So, hopefully it works out for him. I don't really care that much about the Bengals either. In fact, I dislike the Bengals because, they always are just like a bane to us every time they play the Titans. Even when we were good there for a few years, we just couldn't beat the Bengals. And plus, I just hate Joe Burrow because it's not fair that somebody should be that good at football and that handsome. And it's just, yeah, I hate that dude. Um, but yeah, anyway, good for the Bengals. It was probably the best scenario for T. Higgins and probably the best thing they could do. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Going to take a quick break. We'll dive into some more stuff. Alrighty, friends, back again. So, the Lakers are back on. Are back to winning. They lost 4 games in a row, and it looked like things were falling apart. But they got Luca back. They got Jackson Hayes back, who again I have been saying, and I don't know how recently I've done a podcast, so I may repeat some of my thoughts on this. But Jackson Hayes is a very important part of this team, and he was playing. He has been playing well ever since they traded Anthony Davis. Like I'm not saying he's going to make an All Star team. He's not, but he is capable. And that idea that they had to go out and find a capable big man, I thought was incorrect. I thought, if anything, they need to go out and maybe find some depth there at the position. But I think Jackson Hayes could be the starting center on this team and then win a championship. And until LeBron got hurt, and Jackson Hayes got hurt, and Rui Hachimura got hurt, and Austin Reeves got hurt, and the entire team started, getting injured, it looked like I was right. And now, they'll hopefully all be healthy by the time the playoffs start. But there was this segment on, everybody was talking about the Luca trade after it happened, and all the experts, including Brian Windhorst and the people who know this stuff, they showed where the odds had shifted, where Dallas's championship odds had gone down after the trades and after the trade, and the Lakers went up, and they were saying that that was ridiculous because this was a trade where the Mavericks won it in the short term. They're a better team now for this year, and the Lakers, they don't have any defense. They don't have a big man. That's silly. And I said, no, that's incorrect because these Vegas guys are friggin' sorcerers. They know things that no one else could or should or does know. Like, if that's what they set the odds at, that's what they know. And also, I said they're probably setting those odds with the assumption that the Lakers are going to make another move and at least add some depth at the center position, which they tried to do. And thank God it didn't work because I was heartbroken when they traded away Dalton Connect, especially for an injury prone average center. So thank God that didn't work out. But no, and now you see, I mean, even before the injuries started piling up for the Mavericks, the Lakers were better. And you put two of the greatest of all time who are similar players, but both unselfish and both, just great all around players, except Luca usually doesn't play much defense, but offensively just great. I mean, that's a team that, as long as they have some shooting and a guy like Austin Reeves to be a third scorer and an average center, they can win a championship. And man, they were rolling, moved up to number two in the West. Beat Denver, who had just been there, could not get past them. They found a way to really handle Jokic and beat Denver. And hell, they almost beat Denver with the entire team injured a few nights ago, which was crazy. I couldn't believe that happened. But Connect scored 30 something, Reeves scored 30 something in that game. And now, once the team starts to get healthy again over the next couple of weeks, which especially getting LeBron back, obviously, I think the Lakers can win the championship, and I'm very excited about that because I am still, even though you guys probably know my feelings on this, I feel weird because I've never even been west of Texas, but I grew up a huge Kobe Bryant fan, and so I'm just a leftover Lakers fan. I am a Lakers fan with I'm half Lakers, half Grizzlies, I guess, but the Grizzlies just, even though it felt like they should be a real contender this year, it just I don't know, man. Ja has not been as good as he should be this year. When Jaren Jackson got hurt, it was like they couldn't do anything. And Memphis, it's just hard to believe in them. Um, But the Lakers, man, when LeBron gets back healthy, assuming that he's able to get back within the next week or two, that's going to be a team that can beat anybody. And that includes Oklahoma City, who's, yes, unbeatable right now almost in the regular season, but I still, and maybe this is an unpopular idea, I still think they're kind of young to win it all and to really be able to consistently beat these established, experienced teams like the Lakers, like the Nuggets, in a 7-game series. So, I really think that the Lakers are starting to look good again. I'm glad that Dalton Connect is still on the team. Um, and I feel like Jackson Hayes has just been sort of hated on and underappreciated. And you saw he came back healthy last night. They won. And I'm not saying that's the reason, but it was a big part of the reason. I can guarantee you. Um, he is very, very important to this team. And so, anyway, it felt like there was another point I wanted to make on that, but I can't remember what it was. but yeah, just seeing LeBron and Luca play together is so much fun, man. And I had been, I may have shared this before, but I had been pretty much every game making a bet that was Luca and LeBron both to score at least 25 points and the Lakers to win. And man, I was making that bet just automatically for a couple of weeks there, and just it was winning every time almost. Um, and so hopefully he'll be back soon, and hopefully that this is just a regular injury, because the worry is that it's more than that. The worry is he's 40 years old and this is the beginning of maybe his body starting to break down. I hope that that's not the case, because man, I would love to see at least another year or two of Luca and LeBron together. Man, I think they could really do something special. If LeBron can continue to defeat Father Time and prove himself to be superhuman, which he already has. Um, but yeah, anyway, those are my thoughts on the Lakers. And what other, there was, oh, also the MVP thing. Um, right now, it's a two-man race, and it has been for a while. I heard when I was watching Sports Center yesterday, and I can't remember his name, came on there and said it's over because SGA just scored like 40 something, and he has been undeniably great this year. But honestly, other than voter fatigue and not wanting to give it to Jokic again, I don't know how you can look at what he's been doing. He is going to do something this year that has never been done in the history of the game. He is currently at least top three in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. Like, I think he's top three in steals. I know he's at least top five in steals, but I don't think anyone in the history of the game has ever been top three in points, rebounds, and assists. He's that. He's also a top five, I think, in steals. Like, this dude is doing things. He had a 30-20-20 game the other night. I don't know how you can look at what Jokic is doing, which is, historically good, and say that this race is over, give it to SGA, unless you're just, it's that voter fatigue. You're tired of giving it to Jokic. And honestly, until he got hurt, LeBron was starting to make himself an actual case for MVP, and it was cool to see him back at that level again. But I mean, this is the Nikola Jokic has won three MVPs now. This is undeniably the best individual season he's ever had. And so I don't know. I mean, my thinking right now is, it'd be cool to see SGA win it. You got to like him. It's impossible to not like the kid. It's cool to see what he's doing and leading this young Oklahoma City team. But if you're being objective and you're not just talking about not wanting to give it to the same guy again, it feels like Jokic is the MVP. I mean, those are my thoughts. Except there are some people out there who just have the opinion, best player on the best team, that should be a factor. I'm not big on that personally. I don't see that as, but anyway, that's a whole other topic. So anyway, I'm gonna take another quick break. See, oh God, my ears just popped. I'm gonna take another quick break and see if I can find a spot to pull over and look at my notes, and then we'll dive into whatever else I have. Alrighty, hello friends, welcome back. So, I mentioned in the intro that the Titans had shown something resembling competence in free agency, which I was very impressed with. I liked the moves that they made. They were kind of understated, but I think maybe the biggest move that they made was one that, it was signing Dan Moore, who's probably an average left tackle, but had his best season last year, and he's still in his mid 20s. Um, Signing him to a big 4-year deal and giving him a lot of money. I liked that move. And I like it because it basically takes care of two positions for you. Because the offensive line has been the biggest problem on this team for the last 2 years. And that sucks because throughout the history of the Tennessee Titans, it had always been one of the strengths of the team. But signing Dan Moore, who is a good left tackle, to a contract means you can now put him there and you can move JC Latham to the right side. So it basically takes care of two positions, and you can put Latham where he belongs on the right side. He never should have been a left tackle. And you guys may remember if you watched my draft coverage or listened to my podcast, when they made that pick, I absolutely hated it. I hated that JC Latham pick at first. And then I listened to some stuff. I looked it up and I heard that the plan was that they were going to move him to the left side. He was going to play left tackle. And even though I was skeptical about that, it was Bill Callahan who was the mind behind it, who had discussed it with Latham and discussed it with the front office and the head coach and said that he believed this kid could play left tackle. And once I heard that, became okay with it. I was like, okay, this guy is, one of the most respected, one of, if not the best offensive line coaches in the business. If he believes he can do it, then okay, I'm on board. Clearly, he was wrong because it didn't work. JC Latham was average at best as a left tackle. He can be elite as a right tackle. And that was my thing all along. It was like, if he could play the left side, Nick Saban would have put him on the left side. It feels like that was kind of obvious. But I heard that Bill Callahan wanted to move him to the left tackle spot, and so I was like, okay, he knows what he's talking about. But now with Dan Moore, who's, an average to good and still young and hopefully getting better left tackle on that side, you can move JC Latham, who could be an elite Pro Bowl right tackle. You've got Skoronski there at left guard. You've got a good center in Cushenberry. And I think I saw that they signed Kevin Zeiler to play right guard, who is, obviously no spring chicken, but should be able to fill that spot capably for at least a year. So now you've gone from 2 years ago, this being the worst offensive line in football, with some good, free agent signings and some, maybe they're working out now, draft picks. Now it will hopefully go back to being at least no longer a weakness. I'm not saying this gives us one of the best offensive lines in the league, but it should no longer be such a weakness. And why is that so important? And here's the other sort of thing. And it's not necessarily the players that they signed in free agency that made me really happy and made me feel good about what they were doing, as much as it was sort of the that you can see the logic behind it. And what is it all leading up to? What do all these free agent signings mean? Signing a left tackle for, to a 4-year deal, and ensuring you can move Latham to the right side, and signing Kevin Zeitler, securing that offensive line. Who did that? What did they not sign in free agency? They didn't go out and sign Sam Darnold. They didn't go out and sign Russell Wilson. They didn't go out and get Aaron Rodgers or try to trade for Geno Smith. So what does this all mean? It means they're picking Cam Ward number one overall. And that's the most important thing. That's why I like all these moves they made in free agency, because it shows a clear vision, a clear logic, which is something that has been totally missing from this team, it feels like, in their leadership for the last couple of years now. But all these moves show a clear logic of, let's secure this offensive line and let's go get our young quarterback. Let's go get this guy and let's give him protection. Let's try to give him some guys. Though I wish they could have done more in maybe adding some talented receivers, but I mean, there weren't that many out there to begin with, and you've got Calvin Ridley, and they did sign, I think, Van Jefferson, who maybe could be capable still. I do wish that they could have gotten him some more weapons to throw to, but I understand not wanting to commit a lot of money to any big free agents or any, to spend a lot right now, because they are clearly aware that we are now in rebuilding mode. Whereas last year, it kind of, that was what they were so widely criticized about, was it was like, the media was saying they should be in rebuild mode, yet they're spending as if they're trying to compete for a playoff spot in the Super Bowl now. And honestly didn't hate all the free agent signings that they made under Rand Carthon. I actually thought did a pretty good job. I loved the Ridley signing. I still do. And I think that's going to be a great thing for your young quarterback. So I don't think that that's necessarily conflicting with a rebuild and, something, now starting over with Cam Ward. I think that that's actually something that's going to help him. I think signing Lloyd Cushenberry is something that's going to help him. So I wasn't crazy about the Tony Pollard signing, but he's proven himself to be good, and that's a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into the whole roster. They ended up cutting Harold Landry. And I said, you guys may remember, I said at before the trade deadline last year, they needed to trade him. He was one guy that they could still get a valuable trade draft pick for. They could have at least gotten a third round pick, maybe a second round pick, probably a second round pick for him last year if they would have traded him before the deadline. Now they cut him and might get a fifth round compensatory, if that. But now he's going to go and play for Mike Vrabel in New England. But they made some cuts to the roster of guys who just were not really conducive to the rebuild that we're going into, and they made some signings that were. And it all is sort of adding up to clarity at what they're doing number one overall, which is going to be taking the quarterback. Now, the assumption is it's Cam Ward. Honestly, I still feel like it could be Shador Sanders. I know he's fallen way down draft boards because of his arrogance and because he didn't do well in interviews and whatever. But you guys may remember on my last few episodes, I've kind of gone back and forth as to which of those guys I like the most. Cam Ward definitely has the most upside. He's just more physically talented, but you can't ignore the accuracy and football IQ and toughness of a guy like Shador Sanders, who, would probably fit pretty well in Brian Callahan's offense. But, honestly, I think right now the clear separation of Cam Ward and everybody else means that's who's going to be the Titans quarterback next year. And I'm actually finally excited about it because we're not hearing any more bullshit about them. Oh, we're not going to pass on a generational talent at number one, and we're going to take calls on the pick, and we may blah, 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 blah. Hopefully, that was all just smoke, and hopefully, they were never really considering taking Abdul Carter or trading out of the pick. But I don't know. What I do know is that everything they have done indicates Cam Ward right now. And that's what it should have been all along. So maybe they were just, I don't know, blowing smoke up people's ass. Maybe they really were taking some calls. Maybe they were thinking that, if the Giants want to give up a buttload and maybe we can still get Sanders at three. I don't know. But right now, it looks like the Titans actually have a clear vision for what they're doing, and it is rebuilding with Cam Ward as your number one overall pick and your franchise quarterback. And it is a strong offensive line in front of him, and we'll go forward from there. I friggin' love that. I am good with that. So, as far as Will Levis, I don't know what anybody would be willing to give up for him. I mean, maybe he stays on the roster as a backup. I don't know. But, I wanted him to. I wanted him to be able to be the guy, obviously. Um, but it just, yeah, it was never gonna happen. I mean, you guys may remember it. Well, I don't know. I said at the time he was my least favorite of those quarterbacks in that draft, those top quarterbacks. But then the Titans ended up taking him. He looked good at times. I wanted him to do well. I wanted him to be the guy, but he's just not, clearly. And I'm glad that they're not going into this season thinking, we can give him one more shot and try to rebuild the team around him. They have clearly decided it's time to start over at the quarterback position. And when you have the number one overall pick for the first time in however many years, which we did have it like 10, 15 years ago, but that was the year we traded it to the Rams and they took Jared Goff. But when you have a need at the quarterback position and you have the number one overall pick, there is no thinking to do unless you're deciding which one to take. And it seemed like the Titans were being really, really uncertain about what they were going to do. Now it feels like the direction is clear. I'm going to take one more break and then we'll go ahead and talk about whatever else, maybe close things out. Alrighty, friends, welcome back. So it is March Madness season, and maybe 45 minutes into the show is a little bit late to talk about the number one story in sports, but hey, that's the way I roll. It's not like that many people listen to this anyway. Um, anyway, yeah, I mean, I mentioned it briefly in the intro, and I was very glad to see, even though, again, it might have been the worst case scenario that you make it all the way to the finals of the SEC championship tournament and lose because you have to play all those games against tough opponents every way. But I was really glad to see us beat Auburn, and obviously beating Texas was not that big of a deal, but they're not, a pushover. But I was really glad to see us beat Auburn because I felt like we should have beaten them when we played them earlier in the season, and Chaz Lanier couldn't make clutch free throws. Um, and man, Florida is just, they are better than anybody thought this year. And they are deep and they can score with any number of players. And yeah, they're going to be a problem for anybody and everybody they play. But outside of them, Tennessee can obviously beat anybody. I mean, I already put my bet in for Tennessee to win the national championship. Not much, but I put a little bet on that. I did it, filled out a couple of brackets already, and every time I have the Vols winning the national championship. And I mean, it's not all just pure fan delusion. I mean, obviously, we are good enough to win the national championship this year. I hope we don't have to run into Florida again, though, because that is the team. Florida and Duke, I feel like right now have kind of set themselves up as being the two favorites. Duke won the ACC tournament without even having maybe the best player in college basketball. And they have just continued to sort of strangely fly under the radar, it feels like to me, with all the attention the SEC has gotten. Um, Duke, who is, I mean, it's Duke, has sort of just continued to win. And I don't even know how many they've won straight now, but they've been on quite a winning streak for the last month or so. And it feels like they and Florida right now are the two teams that have kind of set themselves up. But I think the way the bracket worked out for the Vols, mm, even though we didn't uh, get the number one seed that we hoped for, I feel like the bracket kind of worked out pretty well for us. If you look at the matchups and the way that things are going to go, um, everyone knows the Vols are a Final Four and national championship caliber team this year. And it just looks like the way that it worked out is not so bad for us because you look and we've got whoever it was, Wofford, I think, in the first round. And then after that, it's UCLA or somebody, which is probably going to be UCLA. And then, I think we'll handle them. And then you've got the one that could be more of a challenge for us, which is Illinois and Kentucky. Whichever one of those is going to be a real threat. But yeah, I think we are better than both of them, even though Kentucky's given us problems this year. That's why, honestly, I hope Illinois wins, I guess. But I do think that we are the better team. And I mean, looking at our bracket, it's until you get to Illinois and Kentucky, that would be in the Sweet 16. Um, I think we've got a pretty smooth ride to the Sweet 16, I think. Um, and then, because let's see, or would that matchup would that be in the Sweet 16? Yeah, it would be. And then you get to the Elite Eight if we're able to get that far, and it's going to be probably Houston. I think Clemson and God friggin' Purdue are going to be factors. But Purdue is not nearly as good this year as they have been in the past. They have been our bane in the tournament in years past. But we are definitely better than them this year. Clemson is another team that's sort of been underrated, but is still pretty good. Um, I think things kind of set up pretty well for the Vols to make the Sweet 16. and then the Elite Eight, and maybe even make the Final Four. I mean, Houston, if it is Houston in that Elite Eight game, they are no joke, obviously. They are experienced, they are talented, they are incredibly well coached, but I kind of like the way things shook out for us. I mean, I think it worked out better for us than, hell, maybe even Florida, who's going to have to face UConn in the second round? And even though UConn has not been, what they had been this year, we know once the tournament time gets here, they're going to be dangerous. You look at Auburn; they're a number one seed. They're going to have to play Texas A&M, who just beat them a week or two ago. Um, Duke has a pretty smooth path. I think they'll have to play Arizona. Um, Alabama also maybe has a pretty easy path looking at it. I mean, there's Wisconsin, there's Vanderbilt in that end of the bracket. Um, but honestly, I think things kind of worked out okay for us. But in the end, you can't predict any of this. I mean, that's why they call it March Madness. That there are going to be huge upsets, there are going to be Cinderellas, there are going to be crazy things happening. But in the brackets that I did I think maybe my favorite one, I did three of them, and I'm sure I'll fill out a few more before over the next day or two. But what I think was my favorite one, I ended up having Duke, Tennessee, Michigan State, and St. John's in the Final Four. Although, and another one I did, it was Florida in that St. John's spot. Um, and maybe that's more realistic, but I do like I do ended up with Michigan State in there every one of the brackets I did. I had them coming out of that bracket with the one with Auburn and A&M in it. Um and I had Duke coming out of their brackets in every one that I did, and obviously Tennessee. The only one I guess that varied was one I had St. John's and one I had Florida. Um, and probably it will be Florida. But anyway, um, I'm excited for that. We got a lot to look forward to with the March Madness, with the NBA playoffs approaching, and the Lakers looking to get back on track. The Grizzlies still being relevant. And then unfortunately comes baseball season. And yeah, but at least that'll give me more time to focus on my other pursuits, which I need to focus more on now anyway, because right now I've got this class and one more, and I will be done with my degree. And this class that I'm in right now is advanced creative writing, and I'm actually really excited about it because the big project for it is for me to write a full length, like 15 to 20 page short story. And I've already started working on that in the little scraps of time that I can find. And I'm taking off tomorrow because I just have to. I have a doctor and a dentist appointment, and I'm going to spend the rest of that day working on that. And so, yeah, baseball season will give me more time to focus on all that stuff, I guess, and I'll try to get into it. I'll watch the Vols, I'll watch the Braves, but I'm just not a big baseball fan. Also, my boys, I don't know why, but I guess I forget to talk about them for some reason on here, and my mom always says something about it. But my boys, they finished. I don't think I've talked to you guys since their basketball season ended, but they finished 7-1 in their little league, and they did great. They were two of, if not our two best players on our team. And now they just started soccer. They had their first practice last week on Wednesday, and Jack scored the only goal that I saw in practice, which that kid is he's unbelievable. Like he's so crazy good at every sport he decides he wants to play. And it looks like soccer is going to be no different. And so, anyway, I hope everyone has had a fantastic early spring so far. I hope you have a fantastic March. I'll talk to you again soon. Check out the YouTube channel. Tell your friends about us. Send the link, share the link, subscribe, post, do whatever you got to do. Get the word out there. And I'll talk to you again soon. All right. Love you. Bye.